What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. Today, we're going to be previewing the NFL draft for the New York Giants, not looking at round one in today's episode. We've done a lot of discussions, Alex, about who the Giants could take at number 3 overall. Could they trade up for a quarterback? Could they trade down, still land a quarterback, or maybe an impact player elsewhere? We've gone over the first round at length. We will continue to discuss the first round, but today, we want to look at round 2, and we want to look at a position of need for the New York Giants, which is wide receiver. And if you look at the past several years of the NFL draft, there have been a lot of wide receivers drafted in the second round who have gone on to become elite playmakers, earn big time second contracts with the teams that drafted them. The second round has slowly turned into a sweet spot for drafting wide receiver talent. Even if you look at this past season, Alex, Ladd McConkey, we loved him in the pre-draft process. Los Angeles Chargers traded up to take him in round 2, and man, what a selection he was. He was one of the best rookie wide receivers in a loaded rookie wide receiver draft class in 2024. So we want to talk about the concept of drafting a wide receiver in the second round, and we've identified 2 receivers that we do like. One of them being a Senior Bowl standout player, another one being an SEC standout player. So we'll go ahead and dive into these 2 guys and discuss them. But before we do, there is another topic at hand for the New York Giants that's worth discussing, at least in brief detail, and that is the fact that the Giants have reportedly put up the ownership of the team at 10% ownership up for sale. So whatever that is that you want to take away from that, go ahead. According to the reports, this is going to be a non-controlling ownership, so there's not going to be much say from whoever buys in here. It's just strictly going to be an investment for that person. It's a way for the Mara and Tisch families to just kind of recoup some cash here and kind of cash in and get rich. That's the initial interpretation of this. However, there also have been some of the beat writers who cover the Giants, Jordan Rannon being one of them, who have mentioned, man, I wonder if Eli Manning might try and get involved in the ownership group. And in my opinion, the only reason that that would be mentioned, and the only reason that Eli Manning would do something like that, is if he was going to have some sort of say in the organization. The Giants want a silent partner here. That's what they said in their statement that they released. They don't want a controlling entity. However, with speculation about Eli Manning, if you don't know, is already a sports team owner. He's in soccer currently. I think it's the Gotham something or other. I don't know the team exactly, but I know that he invests in a sports team. And a couple months ago, he was speaking, I believe, to CNBC and said that he wants to invest in the New York Giants if they ever are put on the market. So if you're connecting these dots here, only a couple months later, maybe Eli Manning could get involved with this. But again, if the Giants are looking for a silent partner, not somebody with control, then it wouldn't make sense for Eli. However, maybe that's just what they're saying for now. Eli gets in there and then he gets some sort of control. Alex, what are your thoughts on this whole thing? Do you think this is a situation that the Giants are setting up where potentially a Tom Brady, to the Las Vegas Raiders steps in and has some control? Maybe that could be Eli Manning. I'll just throw out there before I hand it off to you. Wouldn't that be hilarious if one day the Giants and the Raiders face each other in the Super Bowl and Eli is able to beat Brady again, this time from the ownership level? That would be amazing, historic, all that fun stuff. But Alex, what are your thoughts initially on this New York Giants up for 10% ownership?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. I think, if Eli Manning happens to build a case and, find that level of money, we're talking like $800 million, $900 million worth of change, and he's going to have to go find a private equity firm, and private equity is always going to try to bring that price down. You're not going to get the same valuation. The Eagles sold it to like family ownership. Like it wasn't a private equity firm. They managed to get a better price valuation, about $1 billion better, probably tacked on for sentimental value. And I think they're pretty happy about it right now. But if you have Eli Manning, he's going to have to go get private equity, and he's going to have to find some partners to kind of team up, similar to what Alex Rodriguez just did, over Grizzly, no, I don't know, some Timberwolves, I think. So one of those teams, Alex Rodriguez went and was looking to invest in. Obviously, they had to go get some private equity money. But looking at this situation with the Giants, this to me is a big cash grab for the families, because this past August, they passed a rule that you can sell up to 10% non-controlling equity in a team. So the teams are able to sell 10% now, and it wasn't the case before. So Mara, and according to, like you said, Jordan Rannon said that there's a roster of people that have minority shares, like very small amounts, like maybe 0.5%, 1%. Those people are walking away with a 10%, sale, like 50 mil, 100 mil, like stupid amount of money, guys. Even a fraction of a percent 10 mil, $15 million. Like, this is a big cash grab for the Mara and Tisch family. Pay off some debts. You know, a lot of times these people do not use cash. They use leverage against their assets to pay for things like houses and other big acquisitions. Because the basically why you would do that is the value of the team is growing faster than the interest of the debt that they have. So if the debt has a annual, 5% interest rate, the value of your team is increasing 10, 15%. So you're better off borrowing against your assets than actually using your cash and selling a portion of your team. They may just be trying to cover their debt now, bring it down, have some extra cash, buy a yacht. I don't know. They could be doing anything with it, but definitely an interesting storyline. I know I'd be happy to be a Tisch or a Mara right about now and get my little chunk of change. But unfortunately, we are not, and we watch the rich get richer, and we look ahead to the 2025 NFL draft as the peasants that we are, Anthony.
Yeah, one last note on the ownership thing before we do take our peasant asses over to the NFL draft. Eli Manning's quote, I just want to clarify because I mentioned that he had an interest in an ownership stake here. I'll just read off the quote from CNBC Sports that he gave a couple months ago, or maybe even I think it was just last month. He said, quote, "It's definitely something of interest," during an interview with CNBC Sports. "There's probably only one team I'd be interested in pursuing, and it's the one I played for 16 years, and it's local, and it makes the most sense. But we've just got to figure out if they would ever sell a little bit." That's what he said, and now the Giants are selling a little bit. So you have to connect the dots here and imagine Eli Manning probably knew about this ahead of time, I would imagine, considering he's still in the building every single day. The Eli Manning show that he does for the Giants, everything else in between that he does for the team. I have to imagine that he knew this was coming. And the reason that he said that to CNBC a month ago, or however long ago it was, he probably had some interest already building mutually between he and the Giants, in my opinion. Now, again, I'm only connecting dots and speculating, but that's what we love to do on this channel anyway, is speculate. So I think that Eli Manning's going to try his best to get involved in some sort of an ownership group that buys the stake here, but remains to be seen. We'll see if that comes to fruition or not. Let's go ahead and talk about the second round of the NFL draft, Alex. There's two wide receivers that we really like, Jaden Higgins and Trey Harris. I want to dive into Trey Harris immediately because this is a guy who, I love Ole Miss wide receivers. It feels like every year I fall in love with an Ole Miss wide receiver, or at least one of these physical SEC wide receivers. Last year for me, it wasn't an Ole Miss guy. It was a Carolina guy. What's his name? Xavier Legette. I fell in love with him. Physical SEC receiver, just crazy, built like a shit brick house. The year prior, it was Mingo, Jonathan Mingo, out of Ole Miss. I remember years ago, 2019, in that draft class, they had two receivers. They had A.J. Brown and they had DK Metcalf. I was enamored by A.J. Brown when A.J. Brown wore the Giants t-shirt on an Instagram live following his visit with the team. I was convinced that the Giants were going to take him in the second round. They didn't. Now he's a Super Bowl champion with the Eagles, but we don't want to talk about that. I just love these physical SEC wide receivers. A lot of them pan out at the NFL level. A lot of them are very good prospects, and Trey Harris is no different. Trey Harris is a transfer who went to the SEC, got better once he went to tougher competition in the SEC, and was the favorite target of Jackson Dart, who is a favorite among a lot of Giants fans on this channel. So I really like Trey Harris, and the fun fact about Trey Harris that I'll share with you all if you don't know it, he actually was the high school quarterback for Malik Nabers. So this could be a reunion going from quarterback receiver duo to wide receiver pairing between Trey Harris and Malik Nabers. Sign me up. I think it would be great. And I'm not just saying sign me up because of that connection. Watch the kid play. Go watch his film or his highlights, whatever you want to watch of Trey Harris playing at Ole Miss in the SEC. Physicality, decent speed, very good hands. I really like him. You cannot guard him in man coverage. I think PFF had him with like a 95 overall grade against man coverage or whatever it was. Trey Harris is really fun. Alex, what's your take on him? I think he's a really exciting prospect. And if he's there in the second round, Giants landed a franchise quarterback in round one. Yeah, there's other positions that we need to consider. And so I don't want everybody to jump at us and be like, we have to draft a tackle. We have to draft a defensive lineman. All right, we get all that. But if they are going wide receiver, Trey Harris is definitely somebody that I have my eye on.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, we know the success rate of receivers in the second round. You don't need, and that was partially why we were so on board, Anthony, with the idea of if we're going to take a quarterback in the first round, even if it wasn't the top three guys, obviously we couldn't get one of those. If it was a JJ, if it was this, I was like, if we're going to go that route, Ladd McConkey, and you were in the same boat, get him in the second round. We loved Ladd McConkey. What do you know? He's a star receiver. So, you can find really good value in the draft in the second round at the receiver position. Having a young nucleus of receivers that are cost controlled on rookie contracts, that is a dream come true, Anthony. If you go into next year and you have a rookie quarterback on a rookie contract and 2 receivers with this level of upside on rookie contracts, you are set up for sustainable long-term success. Trey Harris is one of those guys. Obviously, this past year, he was unbelievable. I mean, guys, he had 1,030 freaking yards in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games. 8 games. He put up 1030 yards, guys, and 7 touchdowns with a 78.9% reception rate. Was excellent. Obviously, he dropped 5 passes. Sometimes he can have some drop issues, but for the most part, this guy is a true and tried outside receiver that has the perfect mash of NFL level tangible traits. I mean, he is just perfect in the terms of size and speed. Really big strides. He just gets open, man, and he does a lot of good work after the catch too. A good chunk of those numbers after the catch, 462. So just about
46%, about
right,
almost
right, exactly.
50% of his yards were after the catch. Like, the dude moves with the ball in his hands. He is awesome after the catch.
And I was gonna say just about under 50%. So he does a lot of stuff. He had a lot of yards on hitches, screens, stuff that they're just trying to move the chains. You're just trying to get a couple yards. He turns into big gains. We love guys like that. Neighbors is like that. So having explosive athletes is never a bad thing. Now, a lot of his weaknesses, if you want to, I'll list them off from NFL.com. This is Lance Zierlein. You're going to love this, Anthony. You want to know who his NFL comp is? You're going to love this.
Let me hear it.
You're going to freak out. This is exactly... I get why you like him now. His NFL comp, according to Lance Zierlein, is Alec Pierce.
Oh, nice. I've been banging the drum for Alec Pierce for like 2 months now. That's perfect.
Draft him in the second round. That's 6'3", 210 pounds. The weakness is racked up catch volume with hitches and screens. I don't really care about that because, making something out of nothing is part of NFL system.
Dude, that's the knock on everybody in the Ole Miss offense. That's the same knock on Jackson Dart. It was just the style of offense, and they executed it well. That's going to be the criticism that we hear of every Ole Miss prospect. Dart, all the receivers, the offensive linemen too. That's what we're going to hear about all of them in this draft process. Not that any of their offensive linemen are going to be of interest to us after watching the film, and they were getting murdered every play.
Yep.
But again, that's just going to be the criticism. I don't think it's a very justified criticism anyway.
I don't think so. And you look at some NFL offenses, West Coast style, like that's what Xavier Worthy has built his rookie season on. You know what I mean? Like hitches,
the Giants
and
too. I mean,
screens,
they ran a very West Coast offense. A lot of quick passes. They want to get the ball out of their hands quickly.
Rams.
Yeah, that Neighbors game against Washington, and I believe it was week 2, obviously ended in the unfortunate drop, but the whole game was just yards after the catch on drags and screens and, short underneath routes to Neighbors. So that's really what the Giants do. And before you go back to listing these strengths and weaknesses, I just want to point out there another one of the strengths that I really like for him. He had 13 contested catch targets this past season, caught 8 of them. That's a 61.5% contested catch rate. That is a really high number. To be catching over 60% of your contested targets, that's what the New York Giants need, is a contested catch guy. Yep. Neighbors is great at it, but if you could get a dependable number 2 receiver who doesn't have to break his legs to get open every play and can bail your quarterback out and make some of those tough grabs, that's what the New York Giants really need in a wide receiver too, which is why I've mentioned Alec Pierce and which is why I'm so interested in Trey Harris.
Yeah, Harris is like a much better version of Darius Slayton because he can do the underneath stuff for you too. Like he can run the shorter route concepts, but he's got that blazing speed that he can stretch a defense and force defenses to really, drop 2 safeties deep. He's going to allow a lot more one-on-one coverage with Neighbors. And if you're going to double Neighbors and you're going to give Trey Harris 1v1, throw him the ball. Let him go up and get it. Then you have Wandale 1v1 with slot guys, and he eats them alive most of the time as long as the ball's on his 2-foot radius. So, there's a lot to like about an offense that has Trey Harris and what he opens up and makes available. The other weakness is injuries have been a problem for Trey Harris in the past. So that is something that, you want to keep in mind. He's 22 years old. I would say there is some concern there with the injuries, but it's not we have to see it happen at the NFL level before I label him injury prone. But it is something to be aware of. It is a little flag to that pops up when looking at him. The other weaknesses that Lance Zierlein has listed here: needs crisper routes to avoid drifting. He allows throws to get on top of him, leading to drops. These are all things that are fixable. These are all traits that you can solve with just more repetition. Again, he's a former quarterback, so he's transitioned to a receiver. So he just needs more time, more reps, more experience, and I think he will improve. And honestly, I know Malik Neighbors is a sophomore this upcoming season, but like it's not a bad thing to consider like Trey Harris working with Neighbors. He might learn a thing or two. He might learn a thing or two from playing alongside a player like that. Because Neighbors is one of the best up and coming receivers in the game. And if you get him a quarterback and get these guys the ball accurately on time, this offense has upside to be very, very solid. Obviously, reinvesting in the offensive line is of the utmost importance. And if the Giants go with the receiver, I think their free agent plan is going to be very, very indicative of what their draft plan is going to be. So we'll get a really good idea of where they're looking to spend draft capital. I know BPA is always the preference, but the Giants don't tend to always go for BPA. Sometimes they just try to solve needs. So we will see what they do. I mean, they did it last year at safety, they did it at cornerback, and they did it at running back too. So, I kind of feel that they've been going for BPA at positions of need and not necessarily going for BPA at positions that may be already strengths. So, with that being the case, I do think that Trey Harris is very solid. I think that he has a ton of NFL upside. He has the frame to be a WR1. He just needs more experience and to stay healthy, and we'll see kind of what happens there. So, looking at the next guy on the list, though, Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. A lot of you guys love Jaden Higgins, and there's a good reason to love Jaden Higgins. He is 6'4", 215 pounds, runs like he's 6 foot and 200 pounds. Like he's route running is crisp for a guy of this size. He has like Mike Evans route running, but obviously that frame is there, and he's fast, man. He's so freaking fast. 1,185 yards this past season, 9 touchdowns, 67.4% reception rate. He had 129 targets. Was excellent in that game against Arizona State in the playoffs. He had 115 yards on 7 receptions. They peppered him with targets. Like, this is a guy that he's healthy. And he gets a lot of volume. And I like getting receivers, Anthony, that had a lot of volume in college, because it means they're used to that workload. They're used to staying very active in the latter portions of games. Sometimes you take shots on guys that like have a lot of traits, but they don't have that much target share, and then they kind of fall off as the season goes on. This guy gets better as the season progressed for Iowa State, and I think that's really good, because you see, like, as it gets more grueling, as the season continues, fatigue starts to settle in. Some guys tend to fall off. This guy improves. And I think that was a really nice thing for Jaden Higgins. He dominated at the Senior Bowl. He was lighting it up. I mean, at this point, he may be a first-round pick. I'm not totally sure about that. But if he was there for the Giants at 35, I would take him. I would run to the podium for him if that was an option for us, because this is a player that can immediately give you substantial size at WR2. He opens up your offense in many ways. He can give you that possession frame, but he also is really good downfield, and he's got excellent hands too. This is a guy that dropped 2 passes on 129 targets this past season. Like, the Giants need guys that can hold on to the damn football. They have too many guys that drop too many passes. Jaden Higgins is going to solve a lot of problems. If he's your WR2, he's not dropping the freaking ball, and that is something the Giants desperately need, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think my favorite thing about Jaden Higgins as a prospect, first of all, the way that he competed at the Senior Bowl was tremendous. If you go and you watch his clips at the Senior Bowl, I mean, the guy was lighting it up. There was not a cornerback at the Senior Bowl that could stick with Jaden Higgins. But my favorite thing about him personally, you look at the frame, you look at a 6'4" wide receiver, 215 pounds, who's built like that, and you're like, okay, he's probably a great contested catch guy. That's not his biggest strength, though. That's what I like about him so much. His biggest strength is his route running and ability to separate. A player who moves the way that Jaden Higgins does at his size is a rare, special breed at the wide receiver position. He gets in and out of his breaks so quickly, and he has such great tempo in his routes. The way that he slowly goes through the stem and then bang, he breaks it off. The way that he moves is so smooth and so calculated, I think, is the thing here. You see a lot of IQ in the way Higgins plays, because he really is reading the cornerbacks and then breaking based on the way that they're leaning and really trying to create leverage in his route stem. So the route running is what really pops to me about Jaden Higgins. You already went over all of the production details and the stats, so I won't dive into any of that. I don't need to. I'll just tell you from watching him play, taking a look at some of his film that I have from the cut-ups that I get, I think that he really is impressive as a route runner, and his ability to get in and out of these breaks with explosion and with a level of silkiness. He's just so smooth in and out of these breaks, and he's so fast. So his athleticism and ability to stop and start and go at the size of 6'5", very rare. Those are the traits that you like to bank on. You know, you can always have prospects in the NFL drafts that you like based on their production. You can have prospects that you like in the draft based on their technicality. You can have prospects that you like in the class due to their athleticism and physical traits. Jaden Higgins, he literally checks all three of those boxes. He's got the production, he's got the technicality, and he's got that frame. So he's a rare blend of wide receiver. He has several different skills to his game, and a lot in his bag of tricks that he can pull out on you, whether that's vertical route running, intermediate, across the middle of the field, outbreaking routes. Like, I seriously have seen him run a very full route tree in all of the film that I've watched, and I think the way that he moves at his size is pretty rare and very translatable to the next level. It's actually funny, Alex, you mentioned that Alec Pierce, Lance Zierlein listed him as a comp for Trey Harris. I actually think Alec Pierce is a great comp for Jaden Higgins as well, because I think Alec Pierce is 6'4", 6'5", maybe not 6'3" like Harris, but either way, both of these players are fitting the billing that we are looking for a wide receiver too for the New York Giants. And to his credit, Darius Slayton filled this role pretty well. He's a 6'2" outside receiver with speed to go vertical and make some contested catches at times. He was good at that. Unfortunately, the Giants never really gave Slayton a quarterback that could maximize his skill set. I think he's going to go on and have a successful career elsewhere as a WR3 for another NFL team this offseason. But for the New York Giants, who want to get younger, higher potential playmakers in here, I do think if they're drafting a receiver in the second round, Jaden Higgins makes more than enough sense because of the way that he can play that WR2 role in a higher capacity, in my opinion, than Slayton was able to offer as a former fifth-round pick out of Auburn. I think that Higgins out of Iowa State here, he really does have a better route tree than Slayton entered the NFL with. I think he's bigger and stronger, and I think that he actually does run cleaner routes with more fluidity in his hips and lower body. So all of these things, he checks the boxes. I do think that he's got really immense potential at the next level. Again, the things that he wins with, the way that he runs his routes, it's all translatable traits. You know, sometimes you see guys, Alex, we'll talk about guys in the draft process who just go up there and make 50-50 catches all day long, and that's pretty much their whole bag of tricks. That doesn't usually translate. But when you've got a 6'5" receiver who can run routes like this, that route running and separation ability, that usually translates. That's why I really do think Jaden Higgins, no matter where he gets drafted, I think he's going to be a solid NFL player. And if he does go to the New York Giants, I would really love to see Neighbors, Higgins opposite one another, Wandale working out of the slot. I think you have a really solid trio of wide receivers there. And then it's just about getting a quarterback who can maximize their ability. But yeah, I'm all in on Jaden Higgins. I really like Trey Harris as well. These two wide receivers, either one of them, if the Giants are going wide receiver in round 2, I'd be more than happy with Higgins or Harris in the second round of this year's draft.
Yeah, me too. I mean, you're not going to find a guy this size that runs routes as smooth as he does. And what I do like about him as well is that a lot of people have him, they don't have him pigeonholed as an outside guy. Like, he can move inside. He can move into the Z, the X, the Y. Like, he can do everything for you. And I think that that's ultimately, that versatility is beneficial because the Giants do like to move Neighbors inside. They do like to use some motion. They do like to have some bunch formations and get a little bit more creative with how they're deploying the receivers. And Slayton would always be on the outside. Like, he'd always be stuck out there on an island, and that was his role. They never really used him in any other ways. He was a very much a one-trick pony. He was not very versatile in how they were deploying him. Higgins is a bit different in that way. He's not a burner like Trey Harris. He's not going to like straight line destroy you downfield, but he's very, very solid in zone. He's a silky route runner. I think there's some stuff that needs to be polished, but every obviously prospect needs those types of things. And I think that the drops, that being a strength of his, not dropping the football, is a huge benefit. Like, you get the ball into a good place. And like, honestly, if you're going to go with like a comparison in terms of like what quarterback, if the Giants drafted Sanders and got Jaden Higgins, that's a pretty good combo because Sanders is super accurate on these short to intermediate routes. And that's where Higgins dominates a lot of times. So if you're going to go in that direction and you want a quarterback that's going to be really accurate, like, and it doesn't drop the football, I think that really kind of fits your offense. It fits your trajectory. And I also think that with a guy like Wandale, who has a really small catch radius, that ball's got to be on time and in the perfect place. And obviously with Sanders' accuracy, that does bode well for him too. So I get why the Giants like him, because the offense they're trying to build does favor this highly accurate quarterback that can get the ball on time. Now, obviously Cam has that capacity as well. I'm not going to write that off for him. He's just a little bit more inconsistent with his fundamentals. So that's why I always say I think Sanders is going to have a better rookie season than Cam, because I think Cam does need to be a bit more refined and a bit more balanced and not abandon his fundamentals at times, and his arm angles get all over the place. Like, sometimes he he's a little bit more of a sidearm thrower, but sometimes he even gets a little bit too parallel, and he'll sail balls over the head of his receivers, and that does occasionally become problematic. So I do think that that's something the Giants would like to clean up if they do go with the Cam Ward. But Sanders is a little bit more, not even a little bit. He is the best quarterback in terms of fundamentals in this draft class, and it's really not even close, to be honest. But in addition to that, you watch the guy throwing the ball to Trey Harris, Jackson Dart. We like Jackson Dart a lot. Like, he's a year younger than both these top quarterbacks. I don't think the gap between Jackson Dart and those two guys is like massive. I think that if you put Jackson Dart in a system that was predicated on developing an NFL style quarterback, and he had a whole nother year in college, you might see a quarterback emerge that is closer to Sanders than he is right now. I just think the system was very beneficial to him. I do think another year at a school that really was running an NFL scheme would do him a lot of justice. That's why I do think he needs a bit more time in the NFL level. But his tangible traits are there. Like, the athleticism is legit. His arm talent is solid. Like, he could throw the ball deep. Like, we saw it all on the film. So I do like Jackson Dart a lot. But he's not obviously in this equation if we're going Trey Harris in the second round, or Jaden Higgins for that matter. But those two receivers, you never know.
I will throw out there, Trey Harris, we are talking about him as a second round pick. A lot of draft boards have him in the second round. Some have him even going late first. Pro Football Focus has him as 95th on their draft board. They view him as a third round pick. So it's a varying, again, we are only in mid-February. We've got the combine at the end of the month, and there's a lot of stuff that goes into the process prior to April. I don't know if Harris is a second round pick or if he's a third round pick. We could potentially see an avenue where maybe the Giants sign a bridge, like a Russell Wilson. They want him to start 2 years. Then in the first round, they take the BPA. Maybe that's Carter or Hunter. Round 2, they go Jackson Dart. Round 3, they go Trey Harris. There is an avenue. So that's why it's always fun for us. We talk about everybody that we think is interesting because you just never know. I mean, even when, I remember years ago, Alex, like many, many years ago, I did a film breakdown on Amon-Ra St. Brown when he was a wide receiver at USC. A little film breakdown on him. Then when he got drafted by the Lions, everybody who tuned in the Fireside Giants knew that Amon-Ra St. Brown was the real deal and that he was a legit receiver, and now he's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL for the Detroit Lions. So I enjoy talking about all these prospects anyway, even if we're saying in this scenario, maybe we don't get Harris, maybe we do. Again, we don't know what the draft projection is right now because it's only mid-February. By the time we get to April, it's going to look completely different. We're talking about Dart as a potential second-round pick. He might be a bona fide top 10 pick by the time we get to April. So who knows? But again, just going through the scenario here, like you said, or like I said, there is a world where I guess quarterback in free agency, best player available at 3 overall, Jackson Dart in round 2, Trey Harris in round 3. So we're going to talk about all these guys because you never know which scenario is going to unfold. So I think that this was a fun breakdown, though, because I do think wide receiver in the second round is a legitimate option for the New York Giants, considering the way their roster is constructed and considering if they're going to be bringing in a rookie quarterback and they're leaning on that rookie quarterback, you want to put as many pieces around him as possible. And yeah, that's going to include the offensive line. They could go OL in round 2. However, the wide receivers in round 2 are going to be better than the offensive linemen in round 2 in this draft class in particular. So wide receiver is going to be an option for the Giants, especially if they're going BPA. Very good chance a wide receiver is the best player on their board when they're picking at number 30 or 4 overall. And as a result, we could see one of these guys fly off the board to the Giants in round 2. And that's why we're going to talk about them and as many other prospects as you guys are interested in all throughout this pre-draft process. And we can't wait to keep doing that right here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel if you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.
Perfect.